I have to tell you, of all the television stations, the most fun is Al Jazeera. But I want to start by first of all saying thank you to Daniel for the kind introduction. I want to say thank you to Alan for bringing us all together tonight, and a special thanks to our photographer, David, who I've known for how many years now?
Almost 10 years to the day.
Almost 10 years to the day. And I thank you for showing your photographs and by doing so also helping the Technion.
Thank you.
I don't think I'm telling anyone a secret that over the last 20 years, Israel's moved from being famous for oranges, Jaffa oranges, which we used to export to the world. We're now famous for our technology, and we're famous for apples, Apple Macs, right? Israel is a high-tech superpower. And anyone who goes to Israel sees a much more confident and prosperous country, with technology being the engine that's driving the Israeli economy forward. And the Technion is so much part of that. And we saw that in all sorts of different areas. Recently we see that in the area of medicine, where there's a UK Israel binational fund to fund research in stem cells, and that's a £1.5 million fund going also to help the Technion fund medical research. And the sort of medical research that the Technion is doing is not only changing lives inside Israel, but it's changing lives across the planet. When this new research is changing the way we treat diseases across the planet. But if I talk about that, I should also talk about something else. All of you know this time last week, it was a very tense time in Israel. There were rockets landing all over the south. By the end of the long weekend, we had about 500 rockets that had been fired from Gaza at Israelis, citizens, at our cities, at our communities, on our farms. And yet there was only one casualty, only one death from the rockets. And that's also because of the Technion. Because the Iron Dome system that shoots down the rockets before they can hit their targets in Israel and kill people was developed by scientists at the Technion. So the Technion is saving lives through medical science, and the Technion is saving lives through helping Israel to defend itself against these people who want to shoot rockets at our people. So for all these reasons, to every one of you here tonight who's involved in supporting the Technion and everything the Technion in the UK does to help the Technion do its research, I want to say thank you, because you're helping to make Israel, I believe, the success story it is. I'll finish with one story. I remember as a young child growing up in the 1970s, the Arab oil embargo, and I remember thinking that Israel has a huge strategic disadvantage. Why? Because the other side had the oil. And therefore they could use that and deliver geopolitical clout and get the whole international community to sort of follow their positions because everyone needed the oil. So the good news is in the 21st century, first of all, a lot of those Arab countries we used to fight with, now we have good relationships with. Right? Peace with Egypt, peace with Jordan, we're talking to people across the Gulf and in North Africa. That picture has changed. But maybe in the 21st century, Israel's got the oil. And I'm not talking about the black stuff in the ground, but I'm talking about Israel has commodities the whole world needs, and that is the intellectual products that Israel is producing, the conceptual products of the 21st century. High-tech technology, whether it's in medical technology or in agricultural technology or in cybersecurity. Israel is so much at the cutting edge, and I am very confident about Israel's future because of that, and the Technion is very much part of that. If high-tech is driving the Israeli economy forward, it's the Technion is driving Israeli high-tech. So thank you all for coming, and I hope you have a good evening.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank the Ambassador very much for his support this evening. I'm a friend of David Katz and have been for about a year, and this evening you have the opportunity to look at 35 photos. Each one captures a moment in time, quite unique. But behind each picture, there's a story, a unique story. And when you go round and you look this evening, you will see a story that is very fond to my mind, and that is the one downstairs on the easel. Now, this photo was taken 30 years ago, and I never realized at the time that I would ever meet the person who took that photo. but there's this lady running across the field at Lord's, and as you all are grinning and laughing, she doesn't have any clothes on. And for some reason this stuck in my mind, and it wasn't until I met David that I realised that he was the author of this unique photo, and I wondered how on earth he could have caught that person in that pose, and also of course Ian Botham, who is in the back just crouching down. So let me introduce my friend David, who is now going to tell you the story behind that single picture. There are of course another 34 stories that he could tell you, but I think this one has a nice flavour for us all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric. It's a great honour to be introduced by one of your mentors who has had the most remarkable life and published an amazing book called Diamonds for Rice. Before I have the pleasure of addressing you in relation to that picture, I just want to mention something that Ambassador Regev mentioned before, that and this is a real privilege for me. Your Excellency, we did meet 10 years ago, almost to the day. It was the 2009, although this was still 2008, election campaign, and I'd just been appointed personal photographer to the leader of the opposition then, whose name is Benjamin Netanyahu. A few of you may have heard of him since then. Mark at that point, I'm sorry, Your Excellency, was still working with the Prime Minister of Israel at the time and was the foreign press spokesman, and he, now Prime Minister Netanyahu had been appointed to go round because the campaign had stopped because there was the operation in Gaza at that time. Benjamin Netanyahu, you think it's his personal photographer, I might be able to get his name right, sorry, was appointed to go round and do exactly what Mark was doing as well, going round all the international TV stations, dealing with these guys who really didn't have a nice thing to say about Israel. And I was fortunate enough, and have been fortunate enough, to have worked with, as in Mark and Benjamin Netanyahu, in my opinion, as an Israeli, the two best spokespeople in the history of the modern state of Israel, which is Prime Minister Netanyahu and Ambassador Regev. So I just wanted to say that before. As Eric kindly said, I was responsible for that picture of the streaker all those years ago. I was a young 23-year-old kid who was working for the Daily Mail, who was naive enough not to go where all the other photographers went at that point, which was because it was coming close to tea. They wanted to go where most Fleet Street photographers usually went to get the free alcohol in the press room. And I didn't really drink, and I also was committed to my job because I had to work harder because I was legally blind, which people didn't know at that time. And I stayed there and I got the picture, and I thought they were joking when they said it was going to be on the front page of the Daily Mail, but it was. And whenever people say to me, what was the picture that you're most well known for, considering all the things that I've done since, it was actually that picture, and I'm very, very proud of that picture, and I'm very proud of all the pictures. I'm very grateful to Technion for giving us the opportunity to be here today, to invite us. It's been 11 months in the making, and Alan Aziz and Ida Simons have been amazing to work with, and Technion UK do amazing work and is a very important establishment in Israel for all of us. About 11 months ago, after appearing, being fortunate enough once my story was made public, once we made it public, that I'd been a photographer for over 30 years at the highest level and was considered an internationally acclaimed photographer, that I made public the fact that I was born with a visual impairment, and at 3 months old my parents were told that your son is blind and put him in a blind school and register him as blind, And when my mother questioned that, she was told she didn't know what she was talking about. He was the leading professor in the UK, and he knew more than she did. Fortunately, those of you in the room that knew my mother, and those that don't, knew that she was a tough cookie, and she wasn't going to put up with that. And my father gave me every opportunity to flourish. They weren't in denial in any way that I didn't have a serious eye condition. I suffer from a very rare condition, genetic condition called ocular albinism, which affects the pigments in the eye. It's a lack of pigmentation, which causes nystagmus, which is an involuntary movement of the eyes. And this caused me, in my case, to be considered, and now it's public, that I'm legally blind, which obviously you can understand as a photographer. If people would have known that, it might have affected my career slightly. So I waited, as it was never a case of hiding it, like some people suggest. It was a case of keeping it separate, and I kept it separate because one day I wanted to make it public on my terms, so that I could actually help other kids who are now being born with it and who are dealing with it on a daily basis, and also, which was very important to me, their parents, because my parents never received any support. There wasn't the internet, there wasn't support groups, and I'm very proud that in the last year this has taken me to Korea, to France, to Germany, to Switzerland, Scotland, England, Israel, and last week I was invited to Canada, to Toronto, to do a TED Talk, which was a big thrill. But ultimately what this is all about for me, it's not about my ego. I'm lucky enough to have had a wonderful photographic career, and I'm still in a position where I sometimes still take photographs. But what I want to do is to be able to use my experience and my platform that I have now as someone who has spoken publicly about the fact he is disabled and has a disability, has a visual impairment, to encourage kids in a way that I was lucky enough that my parents actually did to me, but doesn't happen with all kids. To have endured the situation that my parents had to deal with in encouraging me and making sure that I was able to cope and to prepare me for this kind of world. And then when I told my mother at 19 years old I wanted to be a professional photographer, instead of my mother saying, "But David, you're blind," she said, "Go for it." And so everything they did had a huge impact in my life. Now this has led me to where we are now, in speaking publicly as a mentor and as an advocate of visual impairment, working with kids with the same condition that I am, explaining to them that there is very big opportunities for them as long as they don't accept the fact that what they're being told, that they're not supposed to do this. There's no reason why they're not supposed to do this. I prove that. Someone like James Galway or Marcia de Cordova, who's a member of Parliament, or Richard Osman, who you probably all know from daytime television, they all have the same condition as me, and there are a lot of other people in other professions. This has led us to set up a foundation which will be launched in the start of the new year, called the David Katz Foundation, which will be specifically set up to help children and their parents with visual impairments learn that they can do anything that they want to do. When their parents see that the internet is telling them your child won't mix socially, won't drive, won't have a relationship, won't excel in business, won't even have a job, we want to show them that although it's going to be difficult, and nothing is easy for any of us, they will have a job. And I'm very happy today to have in the room with me the chairman of my foundation, Daniel Wynne, and the trustees, Mark Silver, Chris Morgan and Eric Evans. It's a huge honour to be in front of you guys tonight. I hope that you enjoy the pictures. I know that you understand the amazing work that Technion does. And my mother told me when I was 7 years old, when I was starting to realise that I was different to the other kids in the class, and kids were making fun of the fact that my eyes moved, and I couldn't see properly. I had to walk up to the blackboard, and I had trouble reading, but I was still in a regular school, which was the bravest decision that they ever made because it affected my whole life. But I said to my mother, I can't deal with this And my mother said to me at 7 years old words that will stay with me for the rest of my life and are my motto now when I'm helping kids. David, there's no such word as can't. She was right. Thank you very much.
I was there for that one. Really? Oh, I was there for that one.
I didn't get a chance to speak to you. They wouldn't let me that far forward.
So when I finish, it's going to be the induction.
Oh, yeah.
Like a sauna, isn't it?
That was a very relaxed meeting.
Yeah.